Oh, hey there. I'm Decoy Deloy, and this, my friends, is Music News, brought to you by Hello Merch. Here at Hello, we don't mess around, we do merch. We do it right, and we put artists first. And this week, we're pleased to announce a fresh new addition to the Hello fam. That's right, the legendary Devo is in the house. Formed in Akron, Ohio in 1973, Devo has gone on to inspire countless bands, blending high-concept satire with catchy post-punk sounds. And this is a big year for Devo. First off, there's Devo Doc, which premiered this year at Sundance, directed by Chris Smith, director of the incredible film American Movie. This film offers an inside look at Devo's creative process.
Devo dolls.
At our first marketing meeting we went to, someone said, okay, here's our plan. We're going to do life-size cutouts of you guys and put them in all the important record stores. And we're like, well, how much does that cost? And they go, oh, around $5,000. And Jerry said, could we have that money to make a video instead?
In late September, Devo's Gerald Casale will receive the Ernie Kovacs Award at Dallas VideoFest, an honor that's previously gone to Robert Smigel, and Pee Wee Herman himself, Paul Reubens. And of course, Devo recently hit NPR to offer a one-of-a-kind Tiny Desk performance. Over in their Hello shop, you can score everything from signed posters to shirts, beach towels, or your very own Energy Dome. Head over to the shop now and get yours. Tell them Decoy sent you. All right? In other news, Lusine, Yppah, and Arms and Sleepers are heading out on what they dubbed the Earth to Moon Tour. Formed in 2006 by Mirza, Ramic, and Max Lewis, recent years have found Mirza acting in solo capacity, blending ambient music with trip-hop beats and found sound samples. The tour kicks off October 23rd in Brooklyn, and will find the crew traveling cross-country, hitting Phoenix on November 10th, when they'll play Thunderbird Lounge. Arms and Sleepers' latest is called What Tomorrow Brings, and you can find more A&S tunes from Sly Vinyl. And to close, why don't you take a walk with me? Come on. Come on. When I'm not doing the news, I'm down here answering emails. And sometimes I get to answer emails from people like Jaimie Muehlhausen, who is a great guy. And I noticed off of his signature that he had to do something with graphic design, so I looked further into his website and found out he was definitely somebody I wanted to talk to. And here we are.
I'm Jaimie Muehlhausen, and I'm a graphic designer, art director, musician, writer. And I know that's kind of a long list of stuff, that I always say, but I actually do all those things all the time. So, I mean, I kind of look at the creative process as being one big overall thing that can encompass a lot of stuff. I kind of realized, like, I've been a musician my whole, grown up life as well. And I kind of go through phases where I noticed that, like, I work as a graphic designer full time. I've been with Tony Hawk for 20 years and other fun stuff before that. And then on the side, I do all these other little projects and stuff all the time and do freelance work for other people. But what I figured out, it took me a long time to realize this, but I'll go through a phase where I'll do music really intensely, and I'll write a bunch of songs and record an album and put it out, and nobody listens to it, but I don't care because it's just fun to do, right? Then once I get that out of my system and I go do that for a while, then the next thing I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to start painting for an art show. And then I'll paint 100 paintings for a big art show or something. And then I kind of really don't play music all that much during that time period. And then I'll end up doing something else. And I don't really try to discriminate against any one different kind of thing,
I had to know, as someone who makes visual and musical art, how are the two connected for Jaimie?
It's a funny thing because, first and foremost, I make my living as a graphic designer, so I think in those terms. But like, I recently started putting some songs together for a new album. The very first thing I did was design the album cover.
Like many young people, Jaimie knew where to get his foot in the door, at the mall.
I worked actually in a couple of stores. One was when I was still in college, in this really small town in Oklahoma, and they opened up a mall in town. And I'm older, so like that's when malls were like still like, oh my God, there's a mall in town. I got a job at the Kenny's shoe store, and the guy was a real dick about he was just weird to people. And so I quit with no other job, but I needed a job. Out that the record store in the mall was going to open in 2 weeks, Hastings Records. And I mean, I just manifested that job, and I worked there for a while. There was a lot of like really big albums came out when I worked in that store, like Prince's Purple Rain, and my favorite Talk Talk album came out during that time period, and we played the hell out of it, and probably sold more Talk Talk albums in Enid, Oklahoma than anywhere in the country. And that was the era too, where they sold lots of merch, like tons and tons of Duran Duran merch and stuff like that, And then I moved to Tulsa, where I grew up, because I was like, I got to get out of Enid or I'm going to get stuck here my whole life. And so I moved to Tulsa, and there's kind of the cool record store. You had to have real music knowledge and stuff. So I got a job there and worked there for a couple of years before I moved to California. I don't know how I became the jazz guy. Everybody sort of had a specialty. So I kind of locked in on, and it was like the beginning of the whole cool jazz movement, and David Sanborn and Kenny G and Al Jarreau and like all of that era of stuff. And so I just kind of locked in on it because it was my job. And what's funny about that is that during that time period is when punk rock started happening, or got bigger maybe and more acceptable or whatever. And so during the time that everybody else my age and a little younger went through the punk rock phase, I went through like an Al Jarreau phase. Everybody now has like these stories, like, dude, we were at like right in front of the stage for the Melvins, and I was like, oh, we were at the Zoo Amphitheater, and this lightning bolt came down right when Al Jarreau sang the Rooftop song, And I'm like...
After that, Jaimie studied art and played baseball, and once he had his footing, he headed west.
So I got everything I kind of needed, and then I moved to California and started hunting. I was working in a 7-Eleven, but hunting for a job, and just got really, really lucky to come across my first graphic design job. Airwalk Shoes had just started, and I know now when you say Airwalk Shoes, a lot of people just think of like cheap ass, crappy Payless shoes. But yeah, the old original Airwalk company, like it was really catered to the skate, surf, snowboard industry people. I mean, I came on board with the company after they were about 6 months old. Within just a few years, we built that company up to like a $250 million company. To have that as my first job, designing trade show booths, magazine ads, help out with shoe design sometimes, catalogs. Yeah, I mean, just anything you can imagine creatively, I got to do. Airwalk was sort of, we sponsored all the top skaters in the world. We had some of the top surfers and snowboarders in the world. And I just kind of fell into that little world there. And to be honest with you, I don't skateboard, I don't snowboard, I don't surf, I don't do any of those things. But I think as a creative person, I've been able to tap into what's creative about that stuff. In some way, I'm sure that there's drawbacks to not doing those sports and being involved in the artwork, but in other ways too, it kind of gives me a different perspective from other people that are just like totally entrenched in that world from the time they're born. I've been able to sort of just tap into it from a different way, I guess. And so after Airwalk, I just kind of freelanced for a year or so, and then got offered the job at Snowboarder magazine. And there was about 3 snowboard magazines at the time. Transworld was one of the big ones that everybody knows. And then Snowboarder. And then there was some other one. And we were number 3. But about the time that I came on board, we got a couple of really great young writers and super enthusiastic guys and cool photographers kind of jumped on board and stuff. And we ended up taking that to become like the #1 snowboard magazine in the world, right at a time when snowboarding was sort of taking off and becoming more popular. We kind of made the decision that it was a good time to maybe try to bring it back. So I got the job of art directing like this once a year thing for a couple of years. And Tony Hawk was our guest editor at the time. And I knew Tony just a little bit from back in the Airwalk days. When I first started there, he was like a 19-year-old kid that was a skater, but who would know that all these years later, this 19-year-old kid would be my world famous boss,
So what is working with Tony Hawk actually like? Jaimie explains.
like, this is my 22nd year with him right now, but he's a really great person to work for. He's a good person, and he really cares about all of his crew. I mean, I think it says a lot that I've been there almost 22 years now, and I'm not even close to like the longest employee with him. Like at Christmas time, we'll go do some really cool trip for Christmas, and like he'll just say, okay, everybody be at the office at 10 on Thursday, pack a bag for the night. Like we'll fly to Vegas and go have dinner at one of the world's best restaurants and go to a Cirque du Soleil show, stay up gambling all night. And so this year he just said, be at the office at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Pack a very light bag. And that was it. And, oh, and he said, and wear shoes that you can, good hiking shoes or whatever. So we show up at the office and there's a bunch of weird packages laid out on the conference table, sort of like if you were going to do like a white elephant gift exchange or something, but they were all just wrapped in brown paper. And one of them was in the shape of an axe, and one of them was like a pickaxe, and there was like a bunch of like a shovel and some other weird stuff. We're like, what are we getting ourselves into, right? We're just sitting there and we're like, so what's up, Tony? And he goes, I don't know, actually. We're like, what do you mean you don't know? And he goes, I don't want to tell you too much. He goes, but I can just tell you that I met this guy in New York and I've known him for a while. And his deal is that he creates experiences for people. And he's a really interesting guy. He's got a little curly mustache and the, sort of steampunkish style about him and stuff. And he's a bartender as well, but like a connoisseur bartender and like all these things. And he said, and I hired him to create an experience for us. And I gave him a budget and we sent him a check. And I don't know what's going to happen from now forward. And just about that time, Tony gets a text message and it says, open the packages. So we open the packages and, there's all these items. And then there's this big suitcase and it's got a lock on it and there's no combination to the lock. Tony gets another text message and it says, there's a van in the parking lot. Everybody go get in the van. So we all grab our backpacks and we head down and we get in the van and we take off and we drive 2 hours out into the desert, middle of nowhere with the big white, windmills out in the middle of nowhere and all that kind of stuff. We get out of the car and out of the van, and over to the left is like a little small group of people, and they look like something straight out of this like Dexy's Midnight Runners video or something. And they've built this train, and there's a set of railroad tracks that have been abandoned for 20 years. And it's in the middle of the desert, and it just goes out into the middle of the desert on these railroad tracks. And so they're like, come on, come out here and hop on the train. So we get out there. One of the little train cars were all handmade, and they were just on these little wheels and a big platform. And then they had found an old abandoned bus in the desert, and they stole these seats out of the bus and put on one of the carts. And then one of them was like, they got a mini grand piano and they built an aluminum frame around it. And there's a guy like sitting and playing the piano, like old timey piano. So I'm sitting on top of the piano. And then there's another cart behind us with like a big parasol and a little bar. And they're mixing drinks for everybody. And they start up this little like motor from a lawnmower or something. And we take off out into the desert, like 15 or 20 of us, however many it was. And then we stop and I'm not going to tell you what we did, but there was something that was part of the ritual of the whole thing that was sort of made it this cool mystical experience for us. And we buried something out in the desert, and maybe someday we'll go find it again or whatever. And then we get back on the train and we go out another couple of like 3 or 4 miles out into the desert. And there's this massive water tower that's abandoned that's out there. And so that's like the next stop, and it's starting to get dark and there's candles all around it and everything. It's super cool. And out steps a heavy metal mariachi band. They're from LA called Metalachi. And they're like playing like mariachi style Welcome to the Jungle and stuff like that, Now, long story short, we end up going back and going into this little town that's nearby and stay the night at this amazing hot springs resort hotel for the night, have a chef cook dinner, and get up the next morning and head back home. And that was our Christmas experience.
In the early 2000s, Jaimie hit it big with one of the very first websites you could describe as viral, menwholooklikeKennyRogers.com.
Yeah, I think when I first came up with this idea to do menwholooklikeKennyRogers.com, it's truly a story of I sent it to 3 friends and we all got a laugh out of it. And then they sent it to 3 friends. And the next thing, like, I just remember looking at the stats and seeing that 100 people had looked at the website in one day, and I just couldn't believe it. It wasn't very long after that people started sending me photos. So pretty early on, it got to him that this website existed, and his lawyers reached out to me, and I was kind of scared. But they said that Kenny loved it and thought it was hilarious. But they wanted to have a legal agreement with me so that when other people did things using his image that they didn't like, they could legally go after them. And then if they said, well, this other guy's doing a whole website of people that look like Kenny Rogers, they can go, yeah, we have a licensing agreement with him. But he got asked about it a lot, like, on talk shows and things. It was really fun to ride that. I was on every single like morning wacky DJ radio show. It was fun.
That's it. Jaimie rules, and we really appreciated his time.
Oh, thanks. I really, I had a good time too. Sometimes these things are weird, but I appreciate it. It was fun.
And that'll do it. I'll be back next week. Decoy out.